Hello, you're on the Storm to Truth channel, and that's how the story begins. So, I'm 35, my wife Jessica is 32, and I've been married for 11 years. We have two kids, Jake, who's 9, and Emily, who's 6. From the outside, our life seemed pretty normal. You know, the typical suburban stuff. Steady jobs, taking the kids to soccer, grabbing groceries every weekend, the works. I mean, after being married for a decade, I knew things would calm down. Life becomes more routine than exciting. But I always thought we were strong. I'm not the flashy type. I've always been more of the steady and reliable kind of guy. I love my family, and I assumed Jessica was happy with our life too. I couldn't have been more wrong. Lately, though, something's been off with her. It started small. At first, I thought she was just stressed with work or the kids. It happens, right? No big fights, no major issues. But slowly, Jessica started to pull away. She wasn't as affectionate, she was always on her phone, and she started coming up with these random excuses to run errands or stay late at work. Now, I didn't want to be that paranoid husband. I trusted her. I figured we were just in one of those rough patches couples go through, but soon it became impossible to ignore. Something was definitely wrong. Everything started changing when Jessica took up a new hobby, going to the gym. Now, Jessica's always cared about staying healthy, but with work, the kids, and just life in general, she never really had the time to focus on herself. I didn't think much of it when she first mentioned joining a local fitness center. In fact, I thought it was great. She deserved time to invest in herself. She even hired a personal trainer to keep herself motivated. Seemed normal enough. I was happy she found something to focus on outside of the daily grind. But after a few weeks, things began to shift, and not in the way I expected. She started spending way more time at the gym, hours longer than what I thought was needed for a workout. It wasn't just the frequency either. It was how she talked about it. Suddenly, the gym became her escape, her me time. And honestly, that was fine at first. I get it, she's got a lot on her plate with the kids and her job, but she'd come back beaming, almost like she had a secret. 10 seconds of attention. Thank you very much. I try. I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel and put a like. If you have any questions, write them in the comments. I will answer each one. And let's go further. Then came the mentions of this guy, some random dude she trained alongside. She was vague at first, but as she kept talking about him, I noticed little things. She'd mention how they'd chat between sets, how he was always there at the same time as her. I brushed it off as harmless, until I couldn't anymore. Her workouts got longer, and her gym bag became this ever-present companion, constantly packed and ready to go. She seemed to light up every time she talked about the gym, but not in the way you'd expect from someone just happy about working out. There was this excitement in her eyes, a kind of energy that had nothing to do with squats or treadmills. One night, she came home late again, claiming she stayed after her workout to help a friend with some stretches. It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't say anything. She was always full of these little justifications, running late, grabbing coffee after, needing time to cool down. But there was something in the way she talked about the gym and this guy that made my gut churn. And then it all started to make sense. There was something more than just fitness going on. One evening, she slipped up. She came home flustered after what she said was an intense workout, but her story didn't add up. I noticed the tension between us, her distance, the way she avoided eye contact, how she'd rush to the shower as soon as she got home. It was like there was something she couldn't wait to wash away. That's when the pieces started clicking into place. Jessica wasn't just working out, she was getting attention, excitement, desire, things that apparently she wasn't finding at home. I tried to push the thoughts away, tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, but when you've been with someone for over a decade, you notice every little shift. And the way she was acting, like a teenager sneaking around, it wasn't just in my head. It didn't take long for me to realize she was tangled up in something much more than just a few extra workouts. I just didn't know how bad it had gotten, yet. So at this point, I knew something was off. I could feel it deep in my gut, but I still didn't have any hard proof. It was all these small things adding up, gnawing at the back of my mind. Still, I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was being too suspicious, reading into things that weren't really there. But then, I found the evidence. One night, after she came home from one of her extra-long workouts, she jumped in the shower, like she usually did. But this time, she left her phone on the kitchen counter. I'm not the kind of guy to snoop through someone's stuff, but something just felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling, so I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I opened her phone. Now here's the thing. Jessica had never been secretive with her phone before. We'd share it to show funny memes or pictures of the kids, so it wasn't locked. I opened her messages, and there it was, text from someone named Mike. At first, it was casual stuff, but as I scrolled, the messages got more personal, flirty, and then downright inappropriate. The last message sealed the deal. Can't wait to see you tomorrow after the workout. Last night was, wow. My stomach dropped. That's when it all clicked. The late gym nights, the way she was acting, the guy she'd been mentioning casually for weeks. It wasn't just innocent flirting. They'd been hooking up. She was having an affair right under my nose. I didn't even know what to do at that moment. I was numb, staring at her phone like it was some kind of horror movie. My heart was racing, my head spinning. I felt this burning anger rise in my chest, but at the same time, it was like my world collapsed. The woman I'd built my entire life with, the mother of my children, had been lying to my face. When she came out of the shower, I was sitting there with her phone in my hand. I didn't even have to say anything. She froze, like she knew what was coming. I think she realized in that moment that everything had come crashing down. I looked up at her, trying to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't. I asked, "Who's Mike?" The color drained from her face. She tried to play dumb at first, muttering something about him being just a friend from the gym. But I wasn't having it. Not after what I'd just read. I threw her phone down on the table and said, "I read the text, Jessica. Don't lie to me. I know." Her face went pale. She didn't even try to deny it after that. She just stood there, speechless, like a deer caught in headlights. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a fling. She'd been emotionally checked out for months, maybe longer. The woman I loved, trusted, and thought I knew was standing there like a stranger. 10 seconds of attention. Thank you very much. I try. I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel and put a like. If you have any questions, write them in the comments. I will answer each one. And let's go further. I didn't know what hurt more, reading those texts or seeing the look of guilt in her eyes. After I confronted her, there was this thick, unbearable silence hanging between us. I could hear my own heartbeat, and my hands were shaking. Jessica didn't say a word for what felt like an eternity. I was staring at her, waiting for some kind of explanation, some kind of excuse. Finally, she muttered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Didn't mean for this to happen? Like it was some kind of accident? My blood was boiling, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. What do you mean, you didn't mean for this to happen? You've been sneaking around for God knows how long. Was that an accident, too? I asked, my voice louder than I intended. She started crying, saying she was confused, that she didn't know why it happened, that she was lost and felt like she needed something more in her life. More? After all we built? I stood there, trying to process what she was saying, but it sounded like a bad script. Nothing but excuses. She tried to tell me it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything. It was only physical, she said, as if that was supposed to make me feel better. She said it started at the gym, like I suspected, with the personal trainer she wouldn't shut up about. Apparently, it started off innocent, small talk after workouts, flirting, but then it escalated. The late-night gym sessions, the errands. It all clicked. And here's the kicker. She actually tried to make it sound like it was my fault. She said she felt neglected, that our relationship had gotten stale, and that I wasn't paying her enough attention. Can you believe that? She blamed me. The woman who was sneaking around behind my back, cheating with some guy she barely knew, had the audacity to act like I was the reason she did it. I couldn't believe it. I told her straight up, "You could have talked to me, Jessica. If you felt neglected, if you wanted something to change, you should have said something." Cheating wasn't the answer. She just kept crying, repeating that she was sorry and that she'd made a mistake. She kept saying she didn't want to lose our family, that she still loved me, and that it was a stupid thing she got caught up in. But by that point, I wasn't even sure who this person was standing in front of me. It was like I didn't know her anymore. I asked her if it was still going on. She hesitated before finally admitting that it ended a few days ago. Apparently, they'd had some sort of argument, and she decided to cut it off, but I wasn't sure if I believed her. The damage was done. She said she was willing to go to counseling, to do whatever it took to fix things, but I couldn't even think straight. All I could feel was this deep, crushing sense of betrayal. How could she do this to me, to us, to our kids? I left the house that night. I couldn't stand to be around her, not after everything she'd just admitted. I drove around for hours, not even knowing where I was going. My whole world had been flipped upside down in a matter of minutes. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with was someone I no longer recognized, and suddenly I had no idea what to do next. That night, after I left the house, I parked in some random lot and just sat there. I felt hollow, like a part of me had been ripped out and replaced with nothing but anger, confusion, and this heavy sadness I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about everything, our life together, our kids, the future I thought we had. It was like watching it all crumble in slow motion. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I kept replaying our entire relationship in my head, wondering how it got to this point. Had I missed the signs? Was I really that blind? All those times she'd come home late or brushed me off, I had convinced myself it was just stress or life getting in the way. But no, it was him. She'd been sneaking around with some random guy from the gym, and now my marriage, my family, was hanging by a thread. The worst part? I couldn't stop thinking about how she'd blamed me. The guilt she tried to shift onto me, like I was the one who drove her into someone else's arms. Sure, our relationship had its ups and downs. What marriage doesn't? But instead of talking to me, instead of working through it like partners, she went and betrayed everything we'd built together. How was that supposed to be my fault? I was torn between two extremes. One minute, I wanted to scream at her to make her feel the pain she'd caused, and the next, I just wanted to break down and cry. I kept thinking about our kids. How would this affect them? How could I even begin to explain this mess to them without completely destroying their sense of family? Eventually, I ended up back at home, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. I slept in the car that night, just staring at the house, trying to wrap my head around the fact that this was real. It felt like some kind of nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The next morning, I finally went in. Jessica was still there, sitting on the couch, looking like she hadn't slept at all. As soon as I walked in, she started crying again, begging for me to talk, to figure out a way forward. But I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too raw. I couldn't even look at her without feeling this wave of anger and sadness crashing over me. She kept saying that she was sorry, that she'd do anything to fix things, but I didn't know if things could be fixed. How do you come back from something like this? Trust, once it's broken, doesn't just magically rebuild itself. And I didn't even know if I wanted to fix it. I needed space. I told her I wasn't sure where to go from here, but that I needed time to figure things out. I left again, this time heading to my brother's place. He was the only person I could think of who'd understand what I was going through without judgment. When I told him what happened, he was furious on my behalf, but he also knew how conflicted I was. He listened as I poured my heart out about how I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, how I felt completely blindsided, how I didn't know what to do for the kids. It was like everything in my life had just been flipped upside down, and I had no idea which way was up anymore. That night, I realized just how shattered I was. I didn't know if I could stay in the marriage, but the idea of tearing our family apart was just as unbearable. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about me and Jessica. There were two innocent kids in the middle of all this who deserved better than the mess we'd created. I was stuck. I didn't know whether to fight for the marriage or walk away. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The days after the discovery were some of the hardest of my life. It felt like I was walking around in a fog, trying to function, but constantly battling the weight of everything that had happened. Jessica kept reaching out, wanting to talk, to fix things, but I wasn't ready. I needed to sort through my own thoughts before I could even begin to deal with her. I spent a lot of time thinking about our marriage, about our kids, about what I wanted for my future. There were moments where I thought about just packing up and leaving, cutting my losses, and starting over. I mean, how do you rebuild trust after something like this? Every time I looked at her, I saw betrayal, lies, and that stupid gym. But then there were the kids. I couldn't just walk away without considering what that would do to them. After a few days, I realized I couldn't avoid the conversation forever, so I went home. When I walked in, Jessica was waiting for me, her eyes swollen from crying. We sat down at the table. No yelling this time, just the heavy silence of two people who knew everything had changed. She started by apologizing again, saying she regretted everything, that she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. She kept talking about how much she loved me, how she was lost, how she wanted to rebuild our family. I let her speak, but I couldn't help but wonder. If she truly loved me, how could she have betrayed me like that? When she finished, it was my turn. I told her how deeply she'd hurt me, how I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, and how I couldn't just pretend like things could go back to normal. I made it clear that what she'd done wasn't just a mistake, it was a deliberate choice that shattered everything we had. But then, I thought about our kids. I couldn't just rip their world apart because of what had happened between us. I told Jessica that for the sake of our children, I was willing to try counseling. Not for us, necessarily, but to figure out how to move forward in a way that was best for them. I didn't promise reconciliation, but I promised to at least give it an honest effort for the sake of our family. We started going to therapy. Those sessions were hard, brutal even. Every time I sat there, reliving what had happened, I had to fight the urge to walk out. But the therapist helped us focus on communication, on unpacking the deeper issues in our relationship. I learned a lot about myself in those sessions. I wasn't perfect, but I also realized that her affair wasn't my fault, no matter how much she tried to blame me. Jessica showed genuine remorse during therapy. She admitted to using the affair as an escape from problems she should have been dealing with in our marriage. That helped, but it didn't erase the betrayal. The road to healing was long and uncertain, and honestly, I still didn't know if I could ever fully forgive her. What I did know was that no matter what happened between us, I needed to be there for my kids. We agreed that their well-being came first, and we'd work on co-parenting, even if we couldn't fix our relationship. Some days, it felt like we were making progress. Other days, it felt like I was just going through the motions, still struggling with the anger and pain. But one thing became clear over time. I wasn't going to rush into any decisions. Whether we stayed together or not, it had to be a choice I was fully at peace with. No more living in limbo, no more half measures. So here I am now, still working through it, one day at a time. I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm learning to trust my gut again, to take it slow, and to focus on what matters most, my kids and my own healing. If there's anything I've learned from this, it's that betrayal isn't something you can just move past with a quick fix. It takes time. It takes work. And sometimes, you have to be willing to let go of the person you thought you knew in order to find yourself again. Whether I stay with Jessica or not, I know one thing for sure. I deserve better than the lies, and I'm not going to settle for anything less than honesty and respect moving forward. Thanks so much for watching. New video every day. Subscribe and like. See you.